It's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Kristen Grauman. Kristen is a world-renowned leader in computer vision and more recently in video understanding. She's won an enormous number of awards for her work, including the Marr Prize and the Helmholtz Prize. She's done fantastic research both at UT Austin and at Facebook AI Research. And really excited to have her here to talk about some video understanding, I think. Thanks, Kristen, for being here, and take it away.
All right, hi everyone. Can you hear me well? Okay, so great to be here, and I love this room, and it's nice to be with this group. I'm going to be talking about video understanding, and specifically for skill learning. And a lot of my work is motivated by skill learning for humans, but I hope you'll see also parallels that mean many of the same perception challenges will matter for skill learning for robots as well. So kind of bridging the areas of this meeting. All right, so let's get into it. When I talk about human skill, I mean the everyday stuff as well as the aspirational stuff. So you can think of, seeing a really artful pass in a soccer game, or you can imagine hearing your friend play a touching piece of music on some instrument, or you're watching the bike mechanic fix your bike, which takes special skill. Or you're watching your brother cooking a really favorite dish. So these are just, examples of the everyday and, as I said, aspirational things where we're trying to observe and pick up new skills. So then the question for us, technically, is to imagine, well, what if AI could understand human skill? So first of all, what would that enable? And second of all, what do we have to solve so that AI does have an understanding of human skill? So I have two big areas where it would matter, what would happen, what would be different if AI understands human skill. One is robot learning. So we can imagine and continually try to build robots that can operate in human-centric spaces. And that means understanding how humans manipulate objects in complex ways, as well as how they navigate human-centric spaces. And so I'm very motivated to think about how video-based learning, which is rather lightweight compared to physical-based learning, might accelerate that process. Imagine kind of robots that learn vicariously through human experience in video. So that's one of the two big areas where this will matter. And then the other one is in augmented and mixed reality, where we can envision how people would pick up skills in new, easier, faster ways, more personalized ways, with assistants who can understand their first-person perceptual experience. So imagine you wearing smart glasses, trying to fix something around the house, or learn one of these new skills, and getting just the right advice at the moment you need it to fix whatever your shortcoming is at the moment. Okay, so two big areas that matter, and next we're going to be seeing, okay, in the realm of AR and MR, what might that future look like? So here's just an illustrative example, the kind of experience that isn't too far away, but that we'd like to achieve. So here again, wearing smart glasses, doing skills like, say, cooking, where as you're about to prepare some new dish, you're getting videos pulled with just the right information for the step that you're on. And then your progress is being monitored in a way that you know when that one's done and when it's time to go to the next. And this is in high contrast to what you do, I imagine, today, kind of back and forth, maybe to a cookbook or mobile device, and a very do-it-yourself and not heads-up kind of experience. And similarly, go all the way to sports, where you're trying to perfect a tennis swing, and with a true AR assistant that understands what you're doing, sees what you're doing, could analyze the skill that you're executing for, the correctness of the pose, give you new 3D visualizations where you can see what you've done and how it differs from what an expert would do. Okay, so we're not building these applications per se, but we are very interested in zooming in on what are the technical challenges that will allow you to do things like this. And I want to lay out important aspects of the video properties that are going to come alongside here. Two things. So one, we're very interested in what's called the egocentric or first-person perceptual experience. Here's an egocentric video. It just means a wearable camera video. Could be on a mobile robot, could be here on a human. And what's special about this video is, unlike a very purposeful video that you or I might take, this is just everything that's coming through the eyes of the camera wearer. So it's uncurated. It's long form, easily, minutes, not to mention hours, compared to today in the literature, often, seconds long a video is the purview. And most importantly, this kind of egocentric perceptual experience is driven by the actor's goals, their interactions, their attention. And you get all this, and we want to get all this from this kind of first-person view. And then the other aspect of video that's kind of helps sets the stage for what I'm going to show you is how-to videos, instructional videos. Has anyone in the room ever consulted a how-to video? Oh yeah, awesome. So you know what they are, and you might find them useful. And what I'd like to have us imagine is when all these how-to videos are not just glimpses that you or I can go to by hand, but are interconnected, where that wealth of human knowledge is organized, structured automatically from AI. This would open up the kind of things I'm going to show you in just a moment. So these skill demonstrations, they show key steps, and they have contextual tips and language, because often people are speaking about what they're doing.
And pop that onto our baking sheet lined with parchment paper.
Okay, and so this is a very nice multimodal resource that we can look to understand human skill. Okay, so with that context in mind, let me lay the two main challenges that we want to address. Okay, where do we need the breakthroughs? So first one is understanding subtleties of human activity. It's no longer enough to say, oh, they're playing a guitar or they're canoeing. We need to know the subtleties of what we call the fine-grained human activity, like exactly how they're using the body, exactly how their interactions with the world change the environment around them. And this is a level of detail that isn't yet mastered in the community. So that's the first challenge. And then the second key challenge is to be able to link what we observe from the egocentric view, our own view, to that of an exocentric view of related content. So on the top, I have an egocentric view, on the bottom, an exocentric. Both of these people are playing guitar, and you might imagine, say, the top is you, the subject, learning a new skill, and the bottom is a coach demonstrating a skill. And so you can see these are very different viewpoints, and yet we know the foundations of visual learning are about our understanding of how to map the activities we observe from others onto ourselves. Okay, so computer vision-wise, this is looking challenging because of the vast viewpoint difference, but it's very important to gain an understanding of that link. And I'll shorthand that as saying ego-exo. All right, so those are the challenges. I'm actually going to start talking about that second one first. And I motivated just now in terms of teacher and student, but also think about robot learner and human demonstrator. Or also think of, and from cognitive science, where we have in developmental learning, infants, children learning from their own perspective while also watching others do demonstrations. So you can see this is a common thread along different dimensions of learning. So the examples I'm going to show you from our research are these. So for linking ego and exo video, one, I want to talk about view-invariant representations. I just said they look very different. How do we start to understand when they are showing us the same thing? Two is trying to understand how to map between the two viewpoints, cross-view translation. And the third is viewpoint selection. Which view would we rather see if we have the choice? All right, so let's take that first one, view-invariant learning. Ego and exo, these are very widely views here. A tennis swing observed in the top from the egocentric, on the bottom from the exocentric. And we set out to learn fine-grained view-invariant representations where, if you just took the representations of these videos using state-of-the-art embeddings, you'll find the thing they most cluster on is the viewpoint itself, right? And that's not useful for us if we want to be able to relate between these. So the pink dots maybe are ego video, the green ones are exo. So what we set out to do is learn an embedding where these aren't related just by their viewpoint, but instead related by the content of the action. And if we did it right, it would look like the plot on the right, where over time, as those dots fade in color, you're seeing the pinks and the greens aligned according to the phase of the activity that was actually observed in the video. Now you might think, okay, one way to learn an embedding that would do this is heavily supervised. If I had lots of ego and exo data paired, I could learn an embedding that says, line up the things that are paired in time. The challenge we wanted to deal with is that we'd like to learn this from unpaired, unsynchronized video data, because that's what you're really going to encounter in the world, in the wild. And so that's the novelty of the method that we develop. And we call it AE2, and this is having two main parts. So we'll build an encoder for these video frames that wants similar stages of the same action to be close in the resulting feature space. And to help that along, given that the viewpoints are so different, we encode not just the frame, but also a human object action or object-centric region. So to note that when you observe a human action from the ego view or from an exo view, the thing that is shared in common is what the person is doing with their hands, what they're interacting with. So we'll expose that to the model in terms of the encoder. And then secondly, we'll put on a loss that says we want to see, we want to achieve an embedding that minimizes the temporal alignment between these two sequences of related frames. So we'll be solving for that alignment. And surprisingly, that's not my device, but there is an alert up here. And then the other part of this is a self-supervised loss to say how we could train this. Very simple but effective idea where we say when we're aligning an ego and exo sequence, if we were to reverse, say, the ego sequence, which is done from the first to the third row, then the loss that we could achieve in matching those two should inherently be higher. So that's for free, a loss I can say, if you're gonna match these two, and if you reverse the second, the loss for matching the reversed sequence should be higher than if you're matching the forward sequence. Okay, so we put those together, and then we looked at different pairings of fine-grained activity with ego and exo views. And here I'm showing you two input video clips. Ego on the left, exo on the right. They're actually different subjects at different times, but they're both breaking eggs. And when I talk fine-grained, those samples are actually unaligned. So in time, they weren't doing the same thing at the same moment. However, with the embedding I just described, if we embed those frames, now here playing for every frame on the left, its nearest neighbor from the video on the right, in our embedding space, you can see that now we're actually aligning according to, okay, the moment when they held the egg, the moment when the egg hit the bowl, and so on. So we're achieving that kind of alignment I motivated a moment ago, where here in this T-SNE embedding, over time, what relates these views is not what camera they came from, but what stage of the activity the instance was in. Okay, so we've learned these embeddings respecting this kind of fine-grained relationship despite the vast viewpoint difference. And then showed that this mattered for tasks we can quantify, like categorizing what phase of the action are you in, do that kind of synchronized playback I just showed you. And this is stronger than what we could do with existing methods in literature for self-supervised learning or alignment-based representations. Okay, so in Ego-Exo, the second thing I wanted to share is looking at translation. So what I just showed you is how do you get an embedding where you can represent these vast viewpoint differences and understand their kind of nuisance factors, and here's what's the same about the action. Here we're interested in being able to translate between those wide views. Why? Well, imagine again my envision application of me, a human learner with a wearable camera, trying to translate what I see from a coach onto my own behavior. Well, that's of interest to me would be to translate from the exo view onto the egocentric view. So literally saying, if we took a video like the one on the left, can we imagine the video like the one on the right? So can we infer what the world and the scene and the activity would look like from the person who's doing the action's point of view? This is a wide viewpoint translation task. And what we explored, again, got into looking at what survives this large viewpoint change and what's the common and important element, which is the hand-object interaction. And so what you're looking at here are three examples. On the left is the input, the first column. The ground truth, meaning the thing we're trying to infer, is that second column. And then our output is the one on the far right. And we built a diffusion-based model that can do this cross-view translation. And you'll see the strength of it compared to what we could get with existing video generation methods like Pix2Pix HD or PGAN or Vid2Vid, which are the other columns in this. And this is pushing the envelope in the sense that, of course, challenges that remain here are generalization or the ability to handle not just new people and new activities, but also new objects. So for example, if you're looking closely in the second row, he's reading the back of a book in this exo view, and so we're hypothesizing what might be on the back of the book, but there's a very low, a lack of visibility for the exact pixels. So a lot of structure that's there to be learned once we know how to relate these two views. All right, so now ongoing in this direction, the third example I wanted to show you is view selection. So everyone acknowledged, like, we've tried how-to videos here and there. you may or may not have had your computer vision hat on when you watch said videos, but what's really interesting about, one aspect that's really interesting about them is the camera control. So imagine, here I have frames from a cooking video where the person's talking to the camera here, then we start to see their hands as they do something, maybe a zoom in on the bowl for a bit while she does something interesting there. Then it comes back to her as she talks about something here in the second row. So there's camera control, right? And we get to glimpse the pieces that, in this case, to a human judge, appear to be interesting, useful to communicate what is there about the skill. Okay, so I want that to be automated, right? So right now, humans need, skilled creators or video editors need to create this kind of sequence and say, okay, here we'll go to camera 1, here we'll go to camera 2. What if we had models that could do the same, could survey the multi-view content and decide where to place a camera? In other words, which camera to select to create an output video. Okay, so we've been exploring this problem. It's a new one to think of it in it's kind of a flavor of automatic cinematography, but here, especially for instructional video, where we want to be able to convey the skill that's being taught in the video. So here's your challenge then. You have a multi-view scene. So an instructional scene here, someone's fixing a bike. We've observed it, say, from multiple views simultaneously, in this case, including can be an egocentric view, the person's wearing glasses as they do it. And we want to be able to know at any time chunk what is the current best view. So if we were forced to watch one viewpoint in order to learn the skill, which one would we choose at that moment? And it's worth noting that changes over time, right? My cooking example just showed that, and here, as he's doing one part of the task, camera 1 may be great, and then as he moves forward, maybe the ego view is the best, and so on. Okay, so off the shelf, a supervised way to tackle this would be if we were told, here are a bunch of multi-view videos, and here at every time step are the best views in each of them. That would be very desirable data, doesn't exist easily, and would be very hard to scale. So the key insight of our approach is how to actually supervise this without going to kind of best view labels. So let me show you how that works. And we weekly supervise it through language. Okay, so the task is, again, given the multi-view instructional video, we're trying to select the best view, but we aren't training with manual labels about where is the best view. So the key insight is to say, well, we don't have best view labels on this data, but very often we have language, captions, commentary, narrations that accompany the video stream. And we can think of those language, that language stream accompanying the video as giving us a signal that's view agnostic. It says, here's the content of what's happening in this visual scene, and that tells us something view invariant about the setting that now we want to select the best view for, even among the training data. So backing up, the approach here is gonna be weak supervision achieved through a pseudo labeling process that we develop. And what I'm showing you here on the right is where for each of, say, here 3 viewpoints, left to right, we can infer from the video itself a caption. So using existing video language models, we'll say, for each of these views, for each of these clips, how would we auto-caption it? Those are the blue boxes on the right. And then we'll compare on the training data those inferred captions to the true narration of the original video. And so here's the key thing. If those compare very closely, like the first view in my example where it says the person holds the rear wheel with both hands to inspect it, which is actually very similar to the overall caption for this multi-view video. The person inspects the rear wheel with both hands, then that would be pseudo-labeled as a good view. So the intuition is, to the extent you can get a good, accurate caption out of a single view, it is a representative view for the larger scene. And that is what we're able to pseudo-label, not from people or annotators commenting on where's the best view, but from language annotations themselves and inferred language on the training data. Okay, so we call this weak supervision from language in order to gain an understanding of where the best view is at any moment in time. And we train a model then to take a video, a multi-view video itself, no language, nothing else, and decide where to cycle between the different cameras at each time point. And I'll show you 2 examples of our model doing that. On the left, you see all views. Here it's 2 views, an ego and an exo view. And on the right, our output video. And you'll see the camera is changing over time on the right-hand side as this person does different activities. Here it's in the ego view. Now it's switched to exo, back to ego. And these are all automatically inferred. What I notice about this one is as the person's kind of doing an interaction, like grabbing an item from the fridge or doing some pouring, it shows back to their ego view. And then as they move about the scene, it's tending to move back to the exo view to give us that broader context. And so that seems to be what was learned to enable that kind of view switch. Here's a second example with rock climbing. Here we have more potential views. So on the left, there's up to 6 different views to choose from at any time. And on the right is the output. And you can see as we get some full body shots showing they're starting their movement. And then we get some full body shots when they're ending their movement, in this case, as well as some ego shots as they're doing some of the climbing. So this is an early work that we've just created to try and do this view selection problem. And again, the ongoing challenges are how to supervise, as well as how to deal with loosely aligned multi-view data. Okay, so I've told you examples from our work where we're looking at how to bridge this gap between ego and exo perspectives. And throughout, we're motivated by understanding fine-grained activities so that we could do things that are useful for robot learning or AR/MR for fine-grained human activity understanding. So I'm going to pause here and talk about data. We've already been touching some data, obviously in some video as I showed you these examples, but we're going to look closely now at it to identify what had been a real blind spot for the community. So coarse activity modeling is the norm. So in video understanding, benchmarks today would often till recently would often focus on rather coarse descriptions, like, again, are they mowing the lawn or are they canoeing? Or just declaring that, oh, they seem to be doing pottery. But as I hope you've already seen a bit from my examples, this is way too distant from the kind of detail that we need. The second challenge in existing video data sets and benchmarks is the more fine-grained or multimodal they get, the more artificial the collection scenarios tend to be. So for very reasonable reasons, once you have like multimodal, let alone multi-view kind of collections, these tend to happen in lab settings where we lose the in the wild nature of the visual context, the scene, the variety of actions and objects. So two shortcomings that are very important if we want to do work in this realm. And so that's where a project that we've done over the course of several years now comes in. And so this is a project called Ego4D, and that was founded on a consortium of universities as well as FAIR at Meta that came together to tackle some of these major video data set issues for the community. And so what's cool about this consortium is 2 things. 1, the expertise that it brought together across these many institutions, and 2, their geographic spread, as we'll see in just a second here. Because this effort was about putting wearable cameras out into the wild by participants in very different walks of life, different ages, gender, occupations, so that we can get samples like the ones you're seeing here of what daily life looks like for them. And so in our initial effort in Ego4D, we were capturing thousands of hours of people indoors, outdoors, solitary activities, social activities, interactions with objects, everyday life, kind of chores, shopping, and so on, and including some skills like you saw across this video. So thousands of such hours of content, about 1,000 different unique individuals wearing these cameras, and some multimodal data as well. And we introduced this a couple years ago, and it represented an order of magnitude jump for scale as well as arguably diversity, because we've kind of taken this collection out of the lab, out of computer science graduate students' hands, no offense to our well-loved partners in computer science, but into the world, right? And so this was what was quite unique, the scale, as well as the fact that you now have people contributing their daily life from many different occupations and so on, and ages. Okay, so we did this first, and this allows us to start looking at this diverse view of human activity from the first-person perspective. And even closer to what I've been talking about with you today is our more recent effort called Ego-Exo4D. So I've already explained what Ego and Exo are. Here was our effort just published about 6 months ago, where we have capture, again, motivated or aspiring to high diversity, high realism, kind of in the wild kind of collection, but here focused on skilled activity. In fact, domains like dance, music, sports, healthcare, where we have both the ego view, like shown on the left, as well as 4 to 5 exocentric views simultaneously viewing the subject. Similar number of subjects, 1,000+ hours of this content, and even higher level of multimodality in terms of different sensors there. Okay, so now we have richer data to tackle some of these challenges I'm talking about, and it's important to note that now the participants are also of, the highest diversity was our goal to gather people we're going to have different visual experiences, but now also different levels of skill. So recruited to wear these cameras are people who are in the range from beginner to highly trained experts in each of these kind of activities. Again, music, sports, dance, and others. And because of the multimodal sensing that we captured on board the wearable camera here, and due to these multi-camera capture, we have very high quality 3D reconstructions of these environments that are provided with the data. That's what you're seeing in this black and white point cloud here, as well as the reconstruction of the camera poses. That's what these cones here are in white, and the egocentric camera reconstructed here in the green, as well as the eye gaze of the participant, which is that red vector I hope you can see in the center. Okay. So now we have this kind of in the wild, real world environments, 4D capture, both the 3D structure as well as this dynamic activity within it. And it's focused on skill, which again is our undercurrent that I'm talking about today. Now these datasets, Ego4D, Ego-Exo, come with a suite of benchmark tasks. These are tasks that our consortium put together, and the data is there to support it, to allow the community to tackle these ongoing challenges in a very organized way. And they range for the things you see here, from proficiency estimation, key step recognition, hand-object interactions, and so on. And in fact, they've been highly attended to. So from left to right on these charts are showing the participation levels, unique teams around the world that are trying their models on these challenges. It's about at the level of 60+ teams from different universities and labs as of the most recent offering. And what does it mean? It means we have a common test bed where progress is being made on these challenges. And indeed, the baselines we put forth in our original publications are now seeing great progress from the consortium and beyond in terms of these challenges. Okay. And of course, these are all publicly available resources, and they kind of keep to motivate work, as I've shown in the community, but also in our own group. And so in the remainder of this talk, I want to shift to that other challenge that I mentioned at the onset, which is the fact that human activity has very fine-grained detail, and our current models don't capture it. So the things that we're looking at here that I'm going to highlight for you is, drawing on the kind of resource I just showed you, like Ego-Exo4D, being able to think of human actions in physical context. So I'll show you an example of interaction prediction. Secondly, trying to learn how to provide actionable feedback on these fine-grained activities. And third, looking at object state changes. So let's talk about that first. The ability to understand human action at a fine-grained level often means understanding how the body is moving to achieve a task. And human body pose and body shape extraction is just getting better and better. But what's really lacking, in our opinion, looking at this problem, is the grounding of these kind of actions in 3D spaces and contextual environments. Because there's a strong link between how a human behaves to do some action and the space in which they're doing it. So in this work, what we set out to do is not just recognize and parse what we see in the video, but anticipate what are the next actions that subject is going to take. So here's a static shot of it, and I'll show you a dynamic one in just a moment. But instead of just capturing what the person is doing, we want to know where and how. And so the where is, okay, where in the environment are they likely to next interact? And the how is with which objects and in what body pose. Okay, so the input is a video stream. The output is, think of a heat map in 3D space that says where they're likely to interact next, and a sample of body poses that they're likely to take on. Okay. So you'll see how this might be possible looking at an example here. So we have someone, and this is an Ego-Exo video, we have someone doing something in the kitchen, and they're working right now on this side counter. And then we're observing all these poses, say, but at this point we could start to anticipate, and that's what the light pink poses are, where they're likely to go next, and those cubes are showing the objects that we expect that they'll be interacting with then. So in other words, looking ahead 1 to 3 minutes into the future, we can anticipate what they're going to do next, and how. So where they'll be moving and how their body will be posed. And the blue then is that, that future becomes the present, and this is just a rolling thing, right? We keep observing what the person is doing, and then we're trying to anticipate forward where they might be next. Okay, and that itself is a well-defined challenge, but let's try to connect it back to this skill learning notion, right? Or an AR assistant that helps you in daily life. It's not enough now to know exactly what's happening, but we have to think a few steps ahead for latency, if nothing else, but also to understand the correctness of the activity as it's unfolding. Okay. Second example, here's someone repairing a bike with some great, this is automatically extracted, the body pose, and then after that observation, we'll start to be able to predict, okay, well then next the person is likely to go over here and have this kind of posture. And that's what you're seeing in the light pink. Okay. So that's one example, kind of bringing human activity down to a much finer grain level than has been done lately, and in fact grounding it in what we call the 4D space, so both space and time. The next example I wanted to show you is the one in this whole talk that gets closest, I suppose, to really thinking about skill transfer from video. So imagine now, let's say we have the ability that you wear some glasses, or you wear a camera and you perform some new skill you're trying to learn. And now what if the AI system could give back commentary about how well you did or what specifically you should improve? Now we all know that a great human coach would do that in multiple ways, multimodal ways, maybe describing what should be different, maybe showing what should be different with their own body. And that's the kind of things that we want to bring to the surface, but now from a video model. And I want to call out a challenge that really makes this why this is a fine-grained activity understanding problem. Maybe a naive approach here would be like, okay, I saw your video, me being the AI system, here's a video of actually how to do it right, where it's just like the prototypical execution of that action. Arguably, that's not enough, right? A good coach is not saying, well, this is perfection, you did what you did, but this is perfection. A good coach would need to be able to say, well, here's what you did, here's the nearest thing you could do differently that will make your performance improved. Okay, that's a fine-grained understanding, not just of what the person did, but also, in our case here, of any other video sample that you could suggest to give the right correction, something that's actionable. Okay, so that's what we mean by actionable. Like a single prototype video does not carry the day. It really, to make it coaching, it has to be actionable feedback that's relevant to your exact performance. And so to do this, we drew on what I think is a cool aspect of the Ego-Exo4D data I have not mentioned already, which is its language. We had hired experts from all the different domains to watch the Ego-Exo participants' video and give commentary like you see here.
Great footwork, using dribble to set up his footwork and his shot, stepping onto that left foot, bringing the ball up, lumping his eyes and hair up. He's already knowing where he's going to go.
Okay, so think about that rich language. So we have this kind of commentary from multiple such experts. That was a professional college basketball coach who was giving that kind of feedback. We have that across all the videos, all the domains. And now you have this parallel stream, right, of the video as well as this free-form language commentary to learn from. You're not done. So as I was motivating, our goal is to be able to generate such commentary from a new video. But there's some things we need to do to get there, even from that nice data, which is to start with that expert commentary data. So you have video accompanied by the kind of speech transcribed to text like I just showed you. But then what we'll do is use a large language model to translate that free-form commentary in a succinct version of it, saying what the person was doing right or wrong. In my slide here, the top example is negative feedback, and the bottom example is some positive feedback. Both are useful for learning actionable feedback. And we also extract from the language the body part or parts that are being most critiqued in that particular commentary. So for example, this one is referring to things about the legs. And we can get that from the language automatically too. So now we're starting to build up training data where for those sequences in this collection of skilled activity video, those that are most closely alignable because of the video, because of the poses the people are taking, allow us to pull up training samples that consist of the video, the commentary text, and the correction video. So what we're aligning for is a positive instance, like the one on the top, a negative feedback instance, like the one on the bottom, but they're very relatable in terms of the poses that were taken. Now we have a triplet that says, here's a good video, here's a imperfect video, here's the commentary to fix it, and here's the video that demonstrates that fix. So what do those look like? Here's one example. So on the left, a video of a learner, so a novice shooting a basket, and then our model pulling up from the language and the video would come up with this sample of an expert on the right as being most relevant to correct, as well as the language in the middle as being a summary of what they should do differently. So using two hands, they should instead be using one hand on the ball and the other at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so that's what we're gaining from this data, pulling out videos, actionable feedback, and the visual correction. And now we can train a model to reproduce that. So expert actionable feedback model. And the high-level idea is to convert all the modalities to tokens and then exploit a large language model. So you can tokenize all these modalities, the video, the body pose, as well as the text from the commentary. And now we have the ability to play with these in different combinations, such as taking as input the video and the pose, and from the language model, taking those transformed inputs, provide the commentary, or similarly, we could provide a score on any video to say how well it provides the correct execution, or we can synthesize the pose that would be the correction. So let me show you some of these. Here, the sample, well, we saw this shot, which was having issues with the hand use, and the expert commentary that's generated by our model is shown here in blue. The shooter's stance is correct, but they need to throw the ball with one hand and guide it with the other. And the ground truth commentary, and we should be sure to acknowledge there isn't one ground truth in the world, but in terms of the commentary that a real expert, say our college coach, gave on that video is what you see on the right in gray. And then there's the video sample we give back, and the expert pose generation for it. Okay, so first steps on our part to try and be able to learn to not just see skill, understand its fine-grained properties, but even give some actionable feedback about what would correct it. Okay, and I'm gonna move forward from here. And now to leave time for questions, I wanna move us to the end and summarize. And here we are. So what I've shown you today is about how we're taking steps to achieve AI understanding of human skill. There's very significant video understanding challenges to do this. And the fronts that we're most concerned with right now are the fine-grained activity understanding, as well as the link between the ego and exo perspectives. And I gave you various examples for those, as well as some foundational data sets that we've been creating to support this work and others. And I'm highlighting here the first authors of the techniques I was showing you today, my students here at UT Austin, and also acknowledging that 15 university member consortium that is behind the Ego4D and Ego-Exo4D work. Great, thanks so much for your attention. I'd love to have some comments or questions from you.
Hello. Thank you for speaking. Very cool work. My question has to kind of do with the ego and exo, like training, and have you or anyone kind of been able to tell like which one is actually providing the model like the information you want? So like egos, you're seeing it and you feel it has more direct like limb perspective. Exo is more relative to the environment, maybe like the severity of the action as well. And then in tandem, they do some other magic. So has there ever been any work to kind of determine the quality of the type of behavior you're trying to get? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And so it's right that, the ego and exo views have some complementary information. They play a different role, and then that will play out in terms of video understanding depending on the domain. And so what we most observed and kind of informed the Ego-Exo4D collection is that in broad strokes, when, what's really valuable about ego is the hand-object manipulation, like up close, hear it well, see it well. And so more procedural activities that involve a series of manipulations to achieve a goal have an advantage in the ego view. Whereas in the exo view, or what you miss though is the full body pose. You only see, what's in front, not the rest of the body, as well as the greater scene context. And so that's where exo view shines. And so that's also where physical activity understanding is hampered or limited by the ego view, and exo view is very important. So in fact, in Ego-Exo4D, there's kind of pockets of data that are domains that are more procedural, others domains that are more physical, like the sports or the dance. And I think we see even in the numbers for kind of the recognition-based tasks, where either view is important. I think the motivation for us has long been to do, to have interest in doing models that achieve good results from ego view exclusively. But this data, but that's not, in some, because, single view is most lightweight and ego is interesting for wearables and AR/MR. But, you could do interesting things certainly by combining these two complementary views.
Thank you.
I think we've got time for maybe two more.
Okay.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you for that talk. In terms of the fine-grained activity, so my research is in kind of surgical robotics, and we typically try to understand activity from like kinematic data or physiological data. But one thing that we know is true is like, I guess human expertise, there's a lot of variability in just doing the same task. So like when you're learning from video, maybe you learn like an average sort of behavior for a task, but you don't really get like those like expert details. So for example, like in soccer, if I'm trying to shoot or take a free kick, it depends on where the defenders line up and different things like that. That might like key in different ways that I kind of adapt sort of like a general procedure. So how do you kind of build that into your models and your predictions and things of that nature?
Yeah, for sure. That's true. I mean, I think at the highest level, you build it in because the visual context provides those cues. So anything you learn is going to be conditioning on those same things. For example, in your case there, where are the other players? And what is the skill that's being demanded at that step? So those factors are present in the video, so we have the opportunity to learn them and their relationship to skill. I think it's so interesting, and the surgical case is one I'd love to learn more about for human skill and including in video. It is so interesting that what we really need to be able to get at are those differences that separate the novice from the expert. And more to your question, in Ego-Exo4D, one thing we were conscious of is there's variety of skill in people. So we have kind of demonstrator proficiency, they've trained for 30 years, they're at this level, they haven't, they're this level. So there's demonstrator proficiency, but there's also demonstration proficiency. So the same expert doing the same task does it with slightly different levels of skill, even in their execution, or they make mistakes. And so there's opportunities to learn both those dimensions from the video, kind of the level of skill in the broad sense, as well as the exact execution at any given time.
Thank you very much for the talk. You had mentioned early on about possibly using this to do robot learning of skills. And one of the challenges there is often there's significant differences in body morphology. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering how you think about being able to translate, human actions to robots who have different degrees of freedom.
Totally, yeah. This is a very important challenge. I mean, the two things that I'm most hopeful about And we've had, some early work from our group looking at these. The first one is, dexterous manipulation has got to be where it's at, right? So the thing that I think humans will most be able to translate to our robots is dexterous multi-finger manipulation. And I think that the embodiment, there's still a gap, right, between today's dexterous hands for a robot and a human hand, but this is a very interesting place to be studying it. And so we and others in the field have done some work to say, okay, if I pull from, even YouTube videos, the 3D hand postures people are using to this task, and I use that as a reward to my agent while it's learning how to do the same, say, functional grasping task, can it learn faster? And there's good signs there. So I think that's one place, dexterous compared to, say, parallel jaw grippers, et cetera, that we have potential to make this connection to video. And then the second thing is quite different. It's to think of a bit less about the body and more about the effects on the environment. And so that's where things, and I omitted it just at the end there, but things like object state changes are so important, because what matters is not exactly if the robot does it exactly the way the human did it, but that they achieve the same effects. And in video, you do get to observe those effects. And so we're looking at things where, can I tell when the butter has melted? Can I tell when the nail is appropriately hammered in? And so observing and then declaring that state change is something that I think could also assist from video and from human, watching how humans do it, even if your body as a robot is different and you get to the same ends in a different way.
Please join me in thanking Professor Grauman for this interesting talk.